The other day, I was talking to our First Lady, Michelle Obama, and I was disagreeing with her in a conversation about relationships. I actually wasn't talking to her, I was talking to the video I was watching of her out loud. But anyway, in this episode, I want to tell you what we were disagreeing about. Because connection doesn't happen by accident, it happens by design. Let's get it. Rolling, rolling, rolling. Oh, what's that from?
Rolling.
Oh, rolling down the ridge. Oh, you could have had it all. Rolling in the deep. You can't see me on Song Association, Shotty. Don't give me. Okay, rolling. What's another?
Rolling, I'm 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 rolling.
Rick, I don't know that one. I'm too old. What is that?
That is. I actually don't know who that is, but I know it's new age.
Okay, new age. How are you, Des? You doing all right?
I am good. A little tired, but I'm good.
Okay, very good. Glad to see you. And glad to see y'all. Can't see you, just like I wasn't really talking to Michelle Obama, but in my mind, I see all of you, even those of you who are just listening. My name is Kristen KB Newton. Welcome to Connection by Design. If it is your first episode with us, welcome. Okay, listen, 2026 started, and I made the decision to do an episode a week, every week this year. And now that we're almost through the first 10 episodes, I've changed my mind. When I tell y'all, I changed my mind so fast. Listen, this is why people don't have podcasts, because we probably make it more complicated than it actually is, right? We don't have to do all of this. We don't have to have the chair and the lights and all the things. You know what I'm saying? We could just talk into our phone according to the podcast experts, right? But, I just don't know how not to do the most. So here we are in today's episode. Listen, so I oftentimes get online and I'll see clips, and if I had the mind to remember to hit record every single time, y'all would see some of the best raw reactions to content because I be having all the things to say in the first take, okay? And so I recently saw a post that Michelle Obama had, and I don't think it's super recent, but she's talking to her brother on their podcast, and she's talking about relationships. And I just want y'all to see the clip and play the clip. I'm going to watch the clip, and then I will give you not my first response, but as much of my first response that I can remember, and probably some extra stuff. So here we go.
Maybe this will be controversial, but I think you can have deep like at first sight, but love to me, in most instances, because there are always exceptions, it takes time to fully have somebody reveal themselves to you over time to know whether or not your affections and your feelings stand the test of time. There's so many tests you need in a relationship. Have you ever traveled together? Traveling together, and not just traveling to grandma's house, doing a tough trip, like go abroad, use passports, be in a place where there is another language and things aren't comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
How do you all resolve those issues? I'm always like, you always want to see how your partner's home life is. Go to Thanksgiving dinner, see how people relate to their families. Do they have a relationship? What are some of the sticking points? If you meet somebody in January, you miss the holidays. So you got to wait you want to get to a holiday where you see people's families, right? I mean, I just think that, time reveals so much.
First of all, I love Michelle Obama, okay? Goals, all right? She is the second most classy lady that I have ever met in my life. The first being my mother. But let me tell you something. Michelle Obama, nothing but respect for her. However, when I first saw this clip and I heard her say, I think you can have deep like for someone, in this whole conversation around like love at first sight. She's like, I don't think love at first sight is a thing, but I think you can have deep like for someone. And my thought in the moment was like, deep like? I don't even know if that's a thing. Deep like I like you deeply? I don't know if I agree. Like, I don't even know if people can, like, what is the difference between like and love? So then my brain starts going. And one of the things that I think she did an incredible job of doing in this video is contrasting what is revealed over time to what you might notice immediately, right, when you first meet someone. So this notion of love at first sight is like, when I first meet you, there's information that I'm gathering about you that I just value, right out the gate. She is arguing that uh, if it's in a conversation of love or an issue of love, none of that is stuff that you can just see on the surface. Love does not come from immediate interactions or things that you can see on the surface. Love happens when there's an exposure of a person's heart or intent or motives or ugly side or how they navigate uncomfortable situations or like what fear causes them to, like how fear causes them to react, what uncertainty does, like, because all of the scenarios that she runs in this video are scenarios where you have the best chance or you are more likely to see the intent of a person. Okay. And so in my mind, I'm like, deep like, I would say it's probably all of it is shallow. I don't think there's a thing of like, oh, I like you deeply. No, 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 no. I think you can like something and you can like it a lot, but can you like deeply? I would argue that you don't like deeply, at least in the conversation around connecting immediately. So when I first meet somebody, I'm taking in information and then I'm trying to see what shared investments we have in that information. And then I'm trying to see if we both have the same return on those shared investments that create this sense of sameness, like between us, right? I'm trying to figure out what common bonds do I have with this person as quickly as possible. I'm also wanting to check the list off of the things that I think are favorable. And if you have more things on that list, it doesn't necessarily make my like for you deeper. It just means that I have a larger like of the things that we share sameness around. If there's a level of depth to your like, I would say the depth comes when you cross that line of, oh, you like this? I do too. Oh, you enjoy this? Oh, I do too. Oh, you do this too? Oh, me too, me too. I don't know if there's depth there. I think there's just an excitement about the amount of sameness. Depth comes, like our First Lady articulated so well, when you cross that threshold into exposed intent. That is level 4 in the 5 levels of connection. And let's just go through a couple of the examples that she gave. She talked about it's important for you to be with someone during the holidays, right? Because holidays surface a lot of things for people. There could be tragedy associated to holidays. There could be trauma associated to holidays. Obviously, great family dynamics typically are exposed around the holidays. So she used the holidays as a way of really seeing something about a person. How do they navigate maybe the extreme of gathering versus being alone, the extreme of like having to spend a lot of money, the pressure of consumerism around the holidays, like how do they respond to those things? Great example. She also mentioned go on a long trip with someone. Why? Because what happens on long trips with people? And she's like, not just a road trip, like go out the country where there's a lot of uncertainty and unfamiliarity and the having to adjust to something that is different and not the same. Again, all things that are happening on levels 1, 2, and 3, we got all this sameness in common. When you go to a whole nother country, our comforts have been removed, our rhythms and routines have been removed. All these things are being removed, and you are having to navigate a new space for the very first time. Do that with somebody that you think you got like for. You get what I mean? Or you think that you're in love with, and see how they adjust. How do they treat people who are different from them? How do they adjust culturally being in different spaces? Where does their cultural intelligence measure? You get what I mean? When you go to a foreign space. And then the whole argument is kind of hooked to this truth that over time things are revealed about a person that you cannot see on the surface, which, as we talk about going from shallow to deep in the 5 levels of connection, that happens over time. Now, I do want to make this disclaimer. It is possible to be exposed to the intent of a person in your first interaction with them. Maybe somebody's in a situation where they get bumped in public or they get cut off in traffic, right? You're with an Uber driver. The Uber driver is a stranger. They get cut off in traffic. Their initial gut response, no filter, if it's attitude, cuss words, flick you off, whatever, right? Okay, I've learned a lot about you in this moment, like off bat, right? I think you can see exposed intent from people around issues that are rooted in intent, right? And so I think that that's possible. However, what I think is happening in this conversation is she's just arguing that there there's a difference between moment and culture, right? In the moment, anyone can look amazing. So she's like, give it time and see if that moment is sustained over time about the individual. And if that moment is sustained consistently over time in all these different scenarios. But then I also think on the negative side, like you can see the dark side of somebody on the front end of meeting them, but then give it time and note that, like, oh, maybe that was just a moment. Maybe they're not like that all the time everywhere, right? So these quick judgments that we make about people in our relationships, they're good information to take in the moment, but you do need time to see if these moments are actually the culture of how that person operates and adapts, or if it was just indeed a moment. And as it pertains to your love life and how you're building relationships with the people that you think you deeply like or could like a lot or want to love, I agree with our first lady in that. Give it time. So let's go to the board and see what this looks like in the 5 levels of connection. Okay, welcome to the board. So this is the 5 levels of connection framework. The first thing that you visualize when you see this is that it is a funnel. Naturally, it's wider at the top, it's smaller at the bottom. On each of these 5 levels, we have titles for the types of relationships we have with people. They can be either strangers, acquaintances, allies, confidants, or in our inner circle. The way that you determine whether a person is one of these things is by the currency you're exchanging with that individual. So with a stranger, the stranger is because you have no information about them. So what you would want to do is get as much information as you possibly can to give them the opportunity to become an acquaintance. And then with your acquaintances, you're trying to figure out what are we both invested in, what are the things that we are both making deposits into. And the more sameness you find on this level right here, the more likely you are to enjoy one another as acquaintances. Now, the way you move from acquaintance to an ally is if the return on that in those investments is actually building interest in your relationship with that person, and not building interest like more interest in them, but a return on investment really in whatever way you're measuring on level 3. Now, I call these relationships on level 1, 2, and 3 shallow relationships because they're kind of dependent on this consistent reciprocity and give and take. The moment we no longer have the same investments, then we're no longer gaining interest, and now the relationship falls apart. This is why in certain dynamics, when the sameness goes away, like, oh, we're no longer going to the same gym, we're no longer working at the same job, we're no longer in college anymore, those relationships start to fizzle out. And so I would argue that sometimes these reciprocity-driven relationships, they're all great, they're all necessary in seasons, they're just shallow, okay? I think you move from shallow to deep in your relationships with other people when all this shared investment creates an interest in the individual separate and apart from what you guys have in common. And that is when you start to fall for somebody because you get to see the intent of who they are, how they are, and why they are. And then ultimately, that intent of knowing who they are leads you to an inner circle connection with them where there's really a lot of vulnerability, transparency, sharing of your heart and what's inside in this space where you allow a person to really see into who you are. Now, how does this connect to our episode? This idea of deep like for somebody at first sight, right? Or even love at first sight. Both of those things to me are very similar in that the depth of whatever it is that you like isn't really that deep. It's probably extremely shallow, but there's probably a large quantity of like. Okay, so if that's what you meant by deep like, then okay. I just like you a lot in a large amount. Why? Because there's probably a lot of things that I'm invested in, that I'm finding in you, seeing in you, that makes me like you a whole lot. Now, if those things were to ever change, or you weren't to like all those things, then it would probably change how much I like you unless there was some point in the relationship where that stuff stopped mattering as much and I got to know you as an actual person, which is what our first lady is arguing, is that once you get to know somebody for who they are, how they are, and why they are, which is likely to happen under these different scenarios when you meet their family, in the holiday season, on a long road trip, in foreign spaces, like in uncomfortable situations, that is when you know, okay, I'm choosing them and that's it. I'm just choosing them, not them and all the things we have in common, not them and all of the interests I'm getting on this relationship. I'm just choosing them. And in this space, I would call that deep. So deep for me is reserved for these two levels of connection. And if you want to learn how to navigate this or identify where the people in your life are on this space, you can always click the link in this episode below that gives you access to a downloadable PDF that helps you to identify, right? To visualize and then identify and then qualify your relationships according to this framework. Thank y'all so much for hopping into this dialogue and conversation today. Thank you so much, Michelle Obama, for having this moment of just blunt honesty and transparency, especially based on your own life experiences and what you have probably seen over the course of your life in your deep and meaningful relationships. If ever there was an opportunity to be on an episode with Michelle Obama anywhere, your girl is there, ready and willing to go into all of the levels of connection and conversation. Anyway, if you are watching this right now and you enjoyed this episode, would you like and share with someone that you think would also like this episode? That would mean a whole lot to me. And I hope that it would bring a whole lot of life to you. Until the next episode, I'm Kristen KB Newton. Remember, connection does not happen by accident. It happens by design. Peace, y'all.